Welcome to another Americans for Limited Government live stream. Joining me today is State Senator Nathan Dahm of Oklahoma. And we're speaking with him today because he introduced a bill that I wrote a story about it's called Kyle's Law. And this is a bill that would end malicious prosecutions. And that is exactly what millions of Americans think happened in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. So we want to have State Senator Dahm speak to us about his bill. And I'll just let you tell us why you felt it was important. And you introduced this bill like almost immediately after the acquittal verdict.
Well, great to be with you. Yes. Actually, this is something that I have been working on previously because I have seen how we have had these malicious prosecutions. And honestly, we've seen how there's been leftist dark money that has gone into a lot of these district attorney races, trying to get these liberal district attorneys elected to where they will target people with this different stuff. So I knew that this was coming. In fact, I had a bill last year that would have addressed some of this, not to the full degree that Kyle's Law will, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But I had a bill last year that actually was stopped and held up by Republican leadership here in the Oklahoma State Senate. So that is one of the biggest problems we have, is that Republicans, a lot of these rhinos, actually are holding up these necessary measures that would protect people and allow us to go on the offense against these leftist tactics that they're trying to do. So this is something I've been working on for quite a bit. As I tracked the Rittenhouse trial, it was obvious that this was a malicious prosecution that had taken place against him. And so I wanted to make sure that something similar doesn't happen to the people of Oklahoma. So right after the verdict came out of not guilty, I was working with our staff and I said, okay, here's what I want to do. I want to get this bill filed as quickly as possible. So what it would do under Oklahoma, this new proposed bill, Kyle's Law, which is Senate Bill 1120, is it would say that if a person is charged with murder, found not guilty of that, and it was a malicious prosecution, that person would get all of their costs covered, whether it's their legal fees, lost wages, those types of things. That would all be reimbursed back to them. They would get all those costs covered. But in addition to that, one thing that we put in there is that the actual prosecutor could be held liable, and they could have to cover part of that cost, not just the state paying for those fees and everything, but the prosecutor could be held liable for those fees, and the prosecutor could potentially even lose their license to practice law, or have other disciplinary measures forced upon them by the Bar Association. They would be reported for that. So this brings some personal accountability and liability onto those prosecutors. That is something that is unique, that no other state has anything at all similar to that. I do know that Washington State currently has in their law that if somebody is found not guilty, that they do get their court cost covered at least. But we did take from other states some things that they had done, but actually holding those prosecutors personally liable, that is something that is very unique in this version of Kyle's Law that we introduced.
And Senator, thank you for what you're doing. You mentioned that there are some rhinos there in Oklahoma who are pushing back against this, that you had, tried to introduce, something similar previously. What possible arguments do they have against this?
Truthfully, with a lot of that stuff, it was just petty politics.
Yeah.
And not just petty, it's pathetic. Many of them do not focus on protecting people's individual rights. They're not concerned about limiting government. They're concerned about their control on power. And so they look at it as, you will comply with what I want. You will sometimes even, hey, you will support my bill. You won't ask questions on my bill. You will vote for my bill, or your bill won't get hurt. And so they aren't as focused on protecting the rights of the people as I am and others are. That should be our primary focus of government. I mean, that's what the Declaration says, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted. And so that should be our primary focus. Unfortunately, with those personalities, with that pathetic politics, those games that they play, sometimes good policy doesn't move forward because of that. So it's very unfortunate. At least with elected officials, we do have accountability measures with elections. But with some of these prosecutors, if they're, and yes, I understand district attorneys are elected, but with some of these prosecutors, there needs to be additional, personal liability that they have to stand up for if they do this malicious prosecution.
Well, I really love your emphasis on protecting the rights of the individual, because, of course, at Americans for Limited Government, that's really the core of what we try to talk about and fight for, is ensuring that individuals are protected from a big government. And you mentioned in your press release that for you, this was also about self-defense, that is paramount. And I think, as you indicated, the video evidence that was shared with the jury and that we all got to see clearly showed early on this was a case of self-defense, that no charges should ever have been brought. Certainly, this should not have been brought to trial. And so, what can we do more to protect the rights of the individual? I mean, other than what you're doing, you're really focused on that with your bill here.
Well, with my bill from last year, what it would have done is it would have changed it, because we do have some good protections here in the state of Oklahoma. And especially with our stand your ground law and our castle doctrine, which I've worked to expand those also, to expand them not just to your doorway, but to your property line, to where you can defend your property. So I've worked on several things like that. But with my bill from last year, Senate Bill 925, the difference with that is right now it is just up to the prosecutor's discretion on if they want to file charges or not. My bill from last year, Senate Bill 925, would have changed that. And it still would have been their discretion, but it would have changed it to where the benefit of the doubt was on self-defense. So you start from that default and saying, okay, we're going to start from this is self-defense, and then proceed and see if we are going to file charges, versus what our current law is, that you file charges and then you have to prove self-defense. So the bill I had last year would have taken a step forward, but this current bill with Kyle's law takes it even further to provide even greater protections. One of which in this is that it's a simple preponderance of the evidence. So basically, if 50% of the evidence, a simple majority of the evidence, it doesn't have to be blatantly obvious like it was with Kyle Rittenhouse. With that video, it was blatantly obvious that it was self-defense. But if it's a simple majority of the evidence shows that, yes, this was a self-defense case, and so then they would be awarded all those damages. So people don't realize how much our rights are being protected. I saw so many people commenting and saying that did understand that this prosecution of Kyle Rittenhouse wasn't just Kyle Rittenhouse on trial. It was our right to self-defense. That's what they were trying to eliminate. I mean, I saw one person saying that, I think it was one of the late night talk show hosts had said something about, if he didn't break the law, then the law needs to be changed. So what they're saying is that you shouldn't have the right to self-defense. They want to remove that from the law, from the books. No, I'm going to take it the opposite direction. I'm going to make sure that we shore up and protect the right to self-defense, because that is an inherent right given to us by our Creator that government should be working to protect.
You are spot on, and thank you for what you're doing. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is, and you mentioned a lot of these prosecutors have been funded by George Soros. He has built up a network across the country, and probably over the past decade or so. And not only are there these malicious prosecutions, like we saw in the Rittenhouse case, but in many cases, they're just choosing not to bring charges if it fits their narrative, right? Like if it's an Antifa rioter or looter in San Francisco, those prosecutors are just sitting back and using prosecutorial discretion. And I know your bill doesn't address that, but is that something that you think also needs to be looked at?
Absolutely, because that is one of the things that, to his credit, I mean, you credit where it's due. George Soros is very tactical in how he has done that. He's realized that, like, for instance, here in Oklahoma, to get a law changed, it takes a majority of the state Senate. So it takes 25 people on the state Senate side. It takes 51 people on the House side. It takes the governor. You have to jump through all those hoops. Whereas if he just gets a prosecutor with leftist ideology, that the prosecutor will just say, okay, I'm not going to charge that person. Or we've seen these things with even with some of the bail reform, different things, and some of those stuff where they release people for small amounts. The left has been very good and strategic in how they've done this, because you can get a duly elected legislature that will pass a law, and then you can get one judge that will strike down that law on the most unreasonable or ridiculous of excuses. And so the left has been very good at going after, getting those prosecutorial positions, those district attorneys, getting judge positions, getting those things to get their stuff accomplished and passed through. And that's something we need to educate people on. If you read the Constitution, the founding fathers did not believe that the judiciary was the most powerful branch. It was supposed to be the weakest branch. The legislative branch was supposed to be the most powerful, because those were the ones that were duly elected by the people and were supposed to be representative of the will of the people. And we've gotten away from that over so many years, where we all of a sudden believe that just because some lawyer in a black robe dictates something, that all of a sudden that's the law of the land. No, the Constitution is the law of the land. That includes the Second Amendment. And so this is something that needs to be addressed. I'm not saying I have the perfect solution on how we force those prosecutors those district attorneys to actually bring prosecution against their supporters on the left that are breaking the law, against Antifa and those types of things. But it's something that definitely needs to be looked at, and I'm open to solutions on that. One other thing I will mention on Kyle's law, so on the current version of it, this solely deals with someone that is charged with murder that is then found not guilty. And that's the current version that I introduced, but I am looking to expand it to include other uses of self-defense that might be tried. If somebody were to discharge a firearm, but nobody was killed in it, there could be malicious prosecution for, discharging a firearm, or felony pointing of a firearm if they use that in the self-defense area. So we are looking to expand this law, not just for to prohibit malicious prosecution against those that are charged with murder, but those that could be charged against for any reason dealing with self-defense. So as other people look to introduce this in their states, other state senators, state reps, I encourage them to expand this as much as possible to make sure that the right to self-defense is paramount. Because like you said, we're seeing these prosecutors that are refusing to bring charges against rioters, against people that are breaking property, even in some instances against people that have attacked other people. We are very close to having two different judicial systems in this country in so many ways. And so those of us that are concerned with liberty, with protecting people's rights, need to make sure that we are protecting the right to self-defense and the Second Amendment, because that is what protects every other right.
No, you're absolutely spot on. And just kudos to you for what you're doing, because I think that this bill that you've introduced in Oklahoma is a perfect example of what former Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis said years ago, where states are the laboratories of democracy. So I think people around the country are going to look at what you're doing there in Oklahoma, see if the bill can get passed. If it gets signed into law, will it provide protections? Will it be effective at stopping these malicious prosecutions? And if it works in Oklahoma, hopefully other states will pick it up, or it's something that the federal government could adopt through Congress, the House and the Senate. But, just great job for you for being really at the front of this and addressing what just so many of us were frustrated about with that Rittenhouse trial. I mean, it just seemed so clear that this is a trial that should never have happened, that this was, as you said, a malicious prosecution brought on, by political ideologues.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for what you all are doing. Those of you in other states, don't wait for Oklahoma to do it. I will say many of our elected officials here are always waiting for other states to do it as well. I'm not afraid to lead the charge. I'm going to do everything I can to get this bill heard and passed. I'm going to fight that. I'm known as the proven fighter that will fight for every battle that nobody else is willing to take on. But so many people here want somebody else to do it first, and then they want to follow behind. They don't want to lead, and we don't have enough leaders. So I encourage people in other states, contact, and you don't have to be a state representative or state senator. Contact your state senator, your state representative. Ask them to introduce Kyle's law in your state, because the more states that are introducing it, the more states that are pushing it forward, the more pressure it puts on these establishment rhinos who don't want to lead, who want to sit behind, who want to just keep the status quo going because that's where they get their power. So we need people to step up. Contact your state senator, your state representative, them to introduce a version of Kyle's law in their state. I'm going to fight for it here in Oklahoma. I hope other states do the same.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you coming on short notice and sharing your bill with us and getting others aware of what they could do in their state. So thank you, State Senator Nathan Dahm of Oklahoma. And if you like what you're seeing today, obviously subscribe to Americans for Limited Government YouTube. And we will close it out. Just stand by and I'll pull up our final screen. So thank you, Senator Dahm.
Thank you so much.